Now, in these cities, they did provide some services to immigrants. The machines certainly did. And in exchange, they asked the immigrants to keep voting for them. The opportunities for corruption far outweighed that. And this is the beginning of an era of reform where people start arguing, we need to be critical of this. There's enough of this. We need to change and fight against this. And so this notion of fighting the good fight, focusing on moral uplift, this is the way through which reformers in this era sought to counter poverty and deal with these urban problems. It's no coincidence. We talked before in our lessons how everything happens for a reason. It's no coincidence that during this time, the YMCA, Young Men's Christian Association, YWCA, are established. Also the Salvation Army. The idea being healthy mind, healthy heart, healthy body, healthy person, and the Salvation Army providing emergency aid and housing to people. YMCAs with their recreation opportunities, education opportunities, and housing when necessary. And we also saw laws like the Comstock laws in this period, anti-prostitution laws, anti-gambling laws, anti-pornography laws, the stopping of Sunday liquor sales, also a form of prohibition which is going to advance and grow towards the national model here over the course of the next 30 to 40 years. That sort of leads us towards then the social gospel. I guess the best way that I could describe the social gospel would be to say it's the 19th century version of a cultural phenomenon you see today on bumper stickers and wristbands of WWJD, what would Jesus do? It was the 19th century version of this notion of applying the teachings of the Gospels, the teaching of Christ, to the problems of urban society. And notice the contrast with social Darwinism. Social Darwinism said survival of the fittest, by implication, the fittest being the wealthiest, so thus the wealthy people must be superior, inherently superior. Social gospel begins to say that the problems or the limitations of the poor rest not entirely with the poor, but with the society itself that lets some people remain poor, and trying to rise above that is harder than for someone who's had everything and every privilege. So you see individuals such as Washington Gladden, who argued that if you were a true Christian, being a true Christian was not necessarily about simply going to church and paying your tithe. Being a true Christian was going to require individuals to fight social wrong, require individuals to fight the good fight that needed to be fought, and work against and rail against these public and civic injustices. Walter Rauschenbusch, in his book Christianity and the Social Crisis, argued that churches should try to strike common cause. Churches across denominations should unite together to try to reform and limit the abuses of industry and fight for peace and try to make the world here and now a better place, not just worry about souls in the hereafter. So there's a religious element to this, but it's a religious element of a benevolent communal element saying that we're all in this together and we all should sort of be our brother's keeper. Temperance grows somewhat out of this as well with the Women's Christian Temperance Union, part of this long-standing thread of prohibition we'd seen going all the way back to Neil Dow and the Maine laws in 1851, arguing that, along with the Anti-Saloon League, that liquor was a corrosive and destructive force on human dignity, on the family, as a potential avenue for expansion of vice, gambling, prostitution, violence, etc. A big major part of these reformers also was to continue the movement towards women's suffrage that we talked about gaining some, at least formal expression after the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention. The argument being that if women were given the vote, you would have voices given the vote that were going to be pro-family, were going to be anti-alcohol, were going to be stabilizing elements, and also would work against, they would counterbalance all the immigrants coming into the country to have white middle class and white native-born American women voting would sort of negate or cancel out some of those votes that were coming from the constant waves of immigrants coming. So there was a nativist appeal as well in some of the political activists who were trying to make the case for allowing women to vote. Susan B. Anthony and Carrie Chapman Chatt were not necessarily part of that part of the conversation. Their argument harkened back to the argument about human worth and dignity, arguing that women essentially deserve that right to vote just as much as men did based on the article, or not the Articles of Confederation, but based upon the Declaration of Independence. All people being granted inalienable rights by their creator that no man or other human being should take away. In terms of settlement houses like those founded by Jane Addams, Hull House, and Lillian Wald were going to offer literacy classes, craft classes, job training, and a sense of dignity to urban dwellers, allow language classes and opportunities to ease that transition within those ethnic enclaves and urban inner city neighborhoods towards allowing people to assimilate and begin to Americanize their experience, cooking classes and classes on domestic science, taking care of the home, and providing a safe and stable environment in which to grow and raise a family. So this notion of moral uplift and fighting the good fight revolves around a great deal of these issues of changing or fine-tuning American moral character. Education changes coming during this time too came with the cities. As you have these mass population concentrations together, earlier movements towards education with Horace Mann in Massachusetts and the McGuffey Readers, which were espousing literacy but also teaching certain American values, that gets expanded upon. By this point in time, compulsory public schooling is going to move beyond merely just the primary level to the secondary level. That's the big switch of this era. You're going to see public high schools emerge and increased attendance required, and the idea of reformers in this era is to get as many young people into these schools as possible without even assessing how well they're doing, but simply getting them in. The idea was to emphasize vocational, even citizenship education for these large numbers of people, which harkens back to the earlier model of take the immigrant and make him or her whole, which was some of the desired drive on this. Collegiate expansion takes place during this time as well. Now, not all this is necessarily federally funded by a long stretch. You've got a large number of private individuals who funded universities, like Vanderbilt University, Stanford, Duke. There's any number of universities that were founded by wealthy philanthropists. John D. Rockefeller, in fact, was critical to the founding of the University of Chicago. You also see new colleges set up, though, that are set up publicly based on the Morrill Land Grant Act of 1862. Most major flagship universities west of the Mississippi River, from Kansas, from University of Texas, University of Colorado. Many of these land grant schools were formed on the basis of the Land Grant Act, which established colleges in these new states as flagship institutions for vocational and scientific training, vocational and trade training and agricultural training of men and women in these states. Any university within your neighborhood or community or local area with the name A&I, A&M, or A&T. Agriculture and mechanical, agricultural and industrial, agricultural and technological. These were largely fruit of the Morrill Land Grant Act, designed to provide practical vocational training at the highest levels to citizens in these states. So the public, through the state, is taking an interest in the education of people at all three levels at this point in time. We also see in this era, coming along with this, changes in what actually happens in the colleges. The emergence of an elective curriculum, the elimination or reduction of mere rote memorization and training, and the idea of introducing electives in the social sciences, but also the applied sciences, the emergent fields of chemistry, biology, geology, and physics. Advanced graduate studies emerged during this time period. The notion of using research-based teaching, research-based information, following the German model of the graduate school and the German model of the university, finally gives Americans an educational level of higher education that sort of equals what the Europeans had in their societies, their university systems for quite some time. In these new sciences, the so-called social sciences I previously mentioned, you see the fields of anthropology, sociology, psychology, economics, political science, history, what have you, and you begin to see these fields being used by their scholars to kind of tackle the questions and issues of society of the day. Why is society the way it is? Why is there inequality? Why do we have these urban problems that seem to manifest themselves, and what can we do about them? So many of these liberal arts, scientific, social sciences universities were also dedicating themselves to throwing themselves at and focusing upon the new problems of this urbanized, industrialized, technological nation. In terms of social and intellectual development, getting us into some of these cultural issues here, the box steel frame skyscraper is pioneered in many ways by Louis Sullivan, who's an architect, champions the phrase form follows function, and seeks to build buildings with long, clean, vertical lines that were not necessarily the wedding cake model building that was a hearkening back to earlier Greek and Roman styles and having sort of a neoclassical revival in that way. With realism in the Ashcan school, you also see artists depicting the gritty realism of everyday urban life as opposed to romanticized images. And in terms of literature, once again, as we said in previous lessons, harken back to some of the things you've learned in your American Lit course. Those notes you have are going to be of great assistance to you to giving you the general storylines and general themes of certain schools of literature. Specifically literature of Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, Stephen Crane, Jack London, Theodore Dreiser, schools that were both realists and romanticists in terms of the literature of the era. Now, in terms of philosophy, the major philosophy that comes out of this era ties nicely in with this issue of higher education and learning. And this philosophy of pragmatism involves the pioneering work of William James, who argues that truth is there to be known. We can find this truth, and it comes from our everyday experience and observation, and we can learn from it. Truth exists, and we can know it. Now, mass urban society, was not necessarily concerned with higher education, was not concerned with pragmatism, was not concerned with realism and literature in the Ashcan school. We do have the emergence in this real society, this mass urban society, for the first time of a concept called leisure time. Because of the nature of the work schedule of the day, the 8-hour day, or even the 10-hour day, whatever it was, you still had 5 to 6 days a week you were working. There was one day off, and people used that day off not as the Puritans used it to sit in religious contemplation, but they used it as a day to rest, a day to recreate. And so you see the emergence of spectator sports, of participatory sports, of Nickelodeons, of fairs, this notion of dance halls, the idea of giving people entertainment. The saloons provided more than just merely a location as a watering hole. The saloon, in many ways, was a cultural and social lifeblood force of connective tissue within a neighborhood or an ethnic enclave. And so you see athletics and amusements emerge during this time. Recreation comes about as a result, or recreation is increased upon in a way that you would not have seen in a pre-mass urbanized society. Mass circulation media. You produce this literate society. You can produce wide-scale, cheap publications with the printing press and distribute them throughout the city with the distribution network. The arteries for transportation have been set up, and it leads to so-called yellow journalism, which are not just immigrant language dailies and the weekly news dailies, but sensationalized stories that were in the newspapers designed to draw the reader in and have them buy and want to read more and buy more. Key architects of this model of yellow journalism would be William Randolph Hearst with the New York Journal and Joseph Pulitzer with the New York World. And their writings and works were going to captivate a generation in terms of getting their interest in reading these stories that were sort of true crime stories or shocker stories designed not really with the truth in mind so much as generating a wide readership audience in mind. So urban America is going to lead to changes in infrastructure, changes in culture, changes in education, and also, as we've seen, changes in living conditions. And it's going to become, through this, the emergence of modern America. More Americans today have lived in urban areas of populations of 2,500 or greater, than have not since 1920. And it's a trend that's actually accelerated. And the number of Americans that live in rural areas, truly depopulated areas, small, modest populations, that number has declined over time. The notion of the American common experience being life on the family farm has changed in terms of the notion of Americans living in a subdivision or in an apartment or in an area around other people that are forming a sense of community. And that journey begins with what we see in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s in this period of urbanization. Where the city goes from here into the 20th century are lessons that we'll engage with at a later date, but this will conclude our lesson then today on urban America.